All right, my family. I give all I have till the war is done. I give all I have till the war is won. I will not lose. I am that I am. Her shine on. Dr. Life. And this is Have Life Coaching. This is Have Life Coaching. I have one of the most extensive libraries. I have one of the most extensive wealth of knowledge on Kush, on the in the beginning people, but more importantly, the in the beginning apple of God's eye. I am going to show y'all our grandmothers, our mothers, my mother, my wife, my daughters, my sisters, all throughout the Word of God. I'm talking about the only people who could claim that they had warrior queens who ruled on earth with their husbands at their side at the head of the greatest kingdoms that the world has ever seen. Once again, I'm going to tell you, I have, over the 27 years that I've been blessed to be married to the queen that I'm married to, and how she raised the bar. My grandmothers and my mother already had the bar supernaturally high. And because of the queens that have always been in my life on all four corners of my family trees, excluding none, to simply show my gratefulness, I have dedicated myself hours and hours each day. And I freely give to you all the priceless, because this is how I see my mother. This is how I see my wife. This is how I see my daughters. And I have put in the time, and I will go show you Evelyn Webb, Gertrude Wilson, Beverly Webb, Kanisha Leggett, Terry Leggett, Deja Leggett, Destiny Leggett. And if they are there, every last one of the queens in our wedding party, it's called the archetype. Okay. So the archetype is the great great grandma. The archetype, then there's the prototype, that's the great grandma. The type, grandma, and the fullness of time type, the mother. Because God said, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation. So his generations are always in a cycle of four to the third and fourth generation. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, reset. Cycles of four. All right. Archetype, prototype. And so the archetype means that's the original that you make all of the others that you put into distribution and circulation from. There's one that you press, that you mold every other one after. That's called the archetype. Then you take the prototype and you make all of the ones. You don't do anything else with the mold. Once you make the mold, you put the mold up. Then you take the prototype and then you press and press and press and press and press. However many you want to put in circulation, you press, 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 press with the prototype. But because the prototype is identical to the archetype, then the ones that you press will come out just like sounding, just if it's a record, it's going to sound just like the archetype because the prototype did not change. Then you have the type. Then the type presses, redistributes, and you have the fullness of time type. That means it's time to start it all over again. And that means we can't go away from the model. We got to go back to the mold. And so then that next generation that's born, if you've handed down the knowledge, right? If you've held on to the root identity, it'll still reproduce the original mold of the archetype. That's priceless. And the only kingdom, and our kingdom can only be ruled by women. It's called the birthright dowry. This is why God said, husbands, love your wife as I. Y'all have gotten away from the blueprint. And then he said, will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me, even this whole nation. He is talking about the marriage. They inverted the marriage relationship. I'm going to show it to you. Let's go to the first example. So this first example is like J.O. Wilson and Gertrude Wilson. All right. Everybody knows who it is. But the reason this is my grandmother Evelyn and not my grandmother Leggett is because of the Apostle Philip. The Apostle Philip, who walked with Jesus, who baptized the Ethiopian eunuch. The Apostle Philip was an Ethiopian. And that same Apostle Philip was who J.O. Wilson and Gertrude named the church that they started in our neighborhood after. Philip. This same apostle, the word of God says he was an Ethiopian. That's a very specific lineage. There's only one place on the earth where the home is. And the queens of Ethiopia are called Sheba. So we're going to the very first, which is Bathsheba, David's wife. So all my mom taught me is stick to the script. This is a playbook, y'all. This is a playbook. So when people get off course, every king that came after this couple, no matter how many kings went off course, every time you see a king that came back and pointed back to the John O. Wilson and Gertrude, meaning David and Bathsheba, that king was able to get the people back on course because David had the marriage relationship right. That's why God said David was a man after God's own heart, because David killed somebody. David did a bunch of other things, but the thing that he had right was his love for Bathsheba. And you're going to see it in this text. So this is not, instead of going and getting Sigmund Freud's philosophy and psychology, which is what everybody does, they tell you go get counseling. You can't help me with a European. The Europeans are mind is the reason why our lives are destroyed. How can you help me with a European's thought pattern? If you are a descendant of Cush, Greece and Rome is insanity and ignorance to you. And you're commanded to let this mind be in you. So the King of Kings was an Ethiopian descendant. Samaria is where the Ethiopians who lived with they called the mixed multitude. This was Cush, Canaan. They tried to disguise it and put it different. They called them the mixed multitude. This is the Canaanites, the Cushites, the Ethiopians lived in Samaria, Nazareth, the Sea of Galilee. They called it Galilee. They called it the hood. So if you want to get your life back on track, I'm just talking about getting back to the roots of what we understand as a people. I'm never going to identify with Greece and Rome. You're never going to sell me Albert Einstein. You crazy? But we got a pattern that every time somebody say, yo, bring me the things of, and I'm going to show my son and I'm going to show my wife. This is to my wife and kids. If you want to know why I stay in the crate so much, it's because everybody is teaching Western philosophy, Western solutions that are only going to make the problem worse. So if we're going to get back on track, then somebody has to go back to the script. Somebody has to go back to the blueprint. And if Pop ain't gonna do it, if the conference presidents ain't gonna do it, who else in our family gonna do it? It gotta be me. The only way to get on track when the nation and the world is off track. Otherwise, disaster and destruction comes. You can work, you can listen, disaster and destruction comes. The disaster is because the people are off track. So, family, check this out. Now, the people was already off track before David found Bathsheba. Once David found Bathsheba, then God like, okay, you done found the queen. Now you ready to rule. So now he is coming to take control of the throne and the clean house from Saul. So let's look at this. We're gonna put this in the concept of what I've been saying, 27 summers. So David is Nas, and Bathsheba is Beyonce. All right. So let's just go back to 1990, let's say 93, 94. Nas already dropped Illmatic. First fruits are mine. First fruits. First fruits are mine. Nas dropped before Jay. He can't change that history. You can't change it. You can't make him first. He not first. First of all, Nas was born in Brooklyn. So Nas is the first MC from Brooklyn. Even though he moved to Queens later, he's from Brooklyn. His birthright is from Brooklyn. So Jay can't even get Brooklyn. He don't get nothing. He don't get first in hip hop. He not hip hop, no way. And he don't get Brooklyn because Nas was born in Brooklyn. So that means the firstborn Nas is the first godson of hip hop. God says to the firstborn, I will expand your territory. So that means Nas get Brooklyn and Queens. That's why after Jay came out and Jay tried to come at Nas, he really wanted Nas to be in a group with the nigga. He still wouldn't be in Nas' group. You got to be on songs with the man, and yo, this man's not trying to be on songs with you, homie. You already got Beyonce trying to make you over and make you a hip hop artist. She can't do it. You can't help him, darling. You can't help him. He's beyond help. So 27 summers ago, Nas dropped first. Jay-Z try and come out and he try and go at Nas. And so he sparked a battle and got destroyed. Same thing with Saul. Saul's on the battlefield. He done led the people off track. So now the Philistines, every time people get off track, the Philistines come to enslave them. They know when the people, because the people be going to the Philistines and they worship it with them. And every time they see them in their temples, every time they see them in their orgies, every time they see them in they drug dens and alleys, they come to Israel to enslave them. They know throughout history, every time Israel prostitutes itself, God will not protect them. So Goliath shows up to cart them off to slavery. Saul looking for anybody to help because it's too late. You done perverted the people. David come up there to feed his brothers. It's just like, you know what I'm saying? I'm telling you, this is identical to Jay-Z was trying to get in the industry any old type of way. He was running under Big Daddy Kane. He was running under this dude. He was Hawaiian Sophie. He was in a group with this dude. He trying to get into any way, shape, or form. So when Def Jam wanted to pimp him out, because that's what Def Jam do. Rick Rubin and Lawyer Cohen and Russell Simmons, you getting pimped out. That's why Puffy do people the way he do, because Def Jam invented it. So Nas come through, just David comes through. He hear Goliath talking crazy, but when you not defiled, when you on point, you respond like a real man does. So now let's fast forward to now. Because David handled that situation, killed Goliath, they won the battle, whatever. Now Saul is envious because the world loves David. Saul kills thousands, David kills his 10,000. So this is Jay. Jay is envious of Nas and Def Jam. Def Jam manipulated the whole hip hop spectrum to undercut Nas records. They dropped blim tapes and mixtapes, and they created the bootleg industry to prevent Nas from crushing Jay-Z. That's what Def Jam did. They Def Jam artists, LL Cool J, talk about creating blend tapes. He created the bootleg mixtape underground just to cut Nas's albums so Jay-Z's sales could be manipulated. So Saul hates David now. Why? Because David is getting more love than Saul is. This is these rappers. This is what Def Jam and them manipulated a East Coast, West Coast beef off of. They manipulated and manufactured. Well, yo, we came from a climate where in the 70s they had gangs and all that in the Bronx. We eliminated that. Them same clowns in them gangs and all that was disco heads, coke heads, all that. We said, yo, we gonna be able to dispute neighborhood after neighborhood. We created hip hop to settle. Listen, the very thought of beefing is the definition of being a whack rap nigga. Beefing, where you gonna kill a man, that's because all of them disco Negroes came and tried to switch from being Summer of Love, Apollo Theater, YMCA, Villagers. You want to go from being a villager in Studio 54. That's the Villagers. These cats turn tricks. They doing anything. They wanted to go from being villagers. First of all, hip hop didn't move around in no clubs. Hip hop started out in a park. Disco is clubs. Woodstock, that rock and roll, that's clubs. Hip hop, we out in the park, cause why? We playing basketball too. We doing graffiti too. We break dancing too. Hip hop is out in the park, out in the open. So now, same thing going on right here with David. So now, Nas is David. Saul, the king who's evicted, is Jay-Z. All right. So listen to how David, and I'm telling y'all that because this is our roots right now today. If you want to go back to being a king in your life, if you want to go back to having wealth, I'm telling you that the core principles of what he does, he looks at what Saul was doing and he's going to do the opposite. He's going to reverse engineer his reign, and whatever Saul was doing, he's going to remove all traces of it and put back in the original root. And his queen is guiding him every step of the way. Y'all ready? I'm telling y'all, this what I'm doing right now. And I'm specifically going to put together a marriage couples group and a dating group, relationship, whatever stage you in, just to prove to the world what a Havillionaire marriage looks like, what a Havillionaire couple looks like, what a Havillionaire engagement looks like. If y'all wanna run with a lion, king of kings pride, because that's what David is. David and Bathsheba, they the lion, king of kings. So this is the blueprint. Let's go and figure out what are the points that he put in. Watch this. I'm telling you, we do the same thing when we analyze. I'm telling you, that's why we call this half-life coaching. This is exactly what we do when we game planning. We know the team that we played against before. We know their strengths, their weaknesses. We know their stars. We know they everything. So we go back and we look at the last time we played them. Like, yo, I could run that play right there. Yo, I guarantee you I'm going to get 4 touchdowns today. This is how you look at previous events that happened, but you got to have real events. That's why you can't have Shakespeare. That's why the European, because all of the European stuff, Zeus and Poseidon, none of that exists. Greek philosophy, Greek mythology. Listen, you got to have real events. So this is First Chronicles 15. So David has taken over the city, right? Watch what he do first. After David had constructed buildings for his wife in the city of David. First thing he did, he built her a palace. Because the words say, leave and cleave your mother and father and cleave to your wife. Even before he did anything for the Lord, he built his wife her palace first. Y'all hear that, men? He prepared a place for the ark of God. So after he built her palace, then he prepared a place for the ark of God. Listen to this, y'all. And he pitched a tent for it. A tent for the ark of God. A tent for the ark of God. Well, how is that different? Saul had rejected God's covenant, so he threw away the ark of the covenant. So Saul had the sanctuary. So David didn't come in and go worship in the sanctuary. David said, the place where Saul was worshiping, I ain't worshiping there. And the thing that Saul threw away, I'm going to get. So David made a covenant in the tent of meeting with the ark of the covenant only. It says it right here, yo. He prepared a place for the ark of God and pitched a tent for it. Then David said, no one but the prophets. So this takes me to my point. Our kingdom is ruled by a Hannah vow or a Zipporah vow. The very first person to ever do the Ethiopian Nazarite Cush vow with God is Moses' wife, Zipporah, who the word also says was an Ethiopian. And her vow it goes just like this. Listen to me, ladies. You are the bridegroom of blood to me. This is the original blood in, blood out oath. Zipporah was saying, even though you have an inferior bloodline, Moses, you are the bloodline of Abraham. I'm the bloodline of Cush. I have the birthright already. You have to be circumcised. She was saying, because I'm having your children and your children have your blood, I will take on your inferior bloodline and I will live under your inferior blood. And this is how they got Ethiopians in with the Hebrews. Zipporah's family took on through a covenant with God, you are the bridegroom of blood to me. And then whenever them women, because of their sacrifice, whenever they came to God and made a covenant with God for children, God always gave them the prophets and the Messiah for taking one for the team and taking on the inferior bloodline when they didn't have to. Her fathers didn't have to be circumcised. Her brothers didn't have to be circumcised. The men in her family did not have to be circumcised. Only Abraham's line did, because that is the line of Cain. The point is, when you have a woman of Cush descent, because of Zipporah intervening and covering Moses, God has allowed them to rule. And all throughout the word of God, when kings who understand the value that the woman of Cush is the apple of God's eye, because they are the direct descendant of Eve, who God made the original covenant with, I'll put enmity between your seed and the serpent seed. That promise is only to one woman, All other women could have claimed that promise, but when they came out and they started following Nimrod and following Cain or whatever, they separated themselves from that covenant. And now you have to choose to put yourself back in that covenant. And if you don't, you're not in it. If you do not know how to claim it and resurrect it and solidify it, you don't just automatically get it. And this is what David is proving, because Saul ruled without it the whole time, and then they got the curses, meaning the people from around them warred against him, everything. That's what's happening in your life. Then run a play. Stick to the script. Go back to the play that worked. 1 Chronicles 15. We call it the Hannah vow. The person who made it most famous, that's why it's called the School of the Prophets, is when Hannah, it was no spiritual men around. Eli was the high priest, and he was corrupted because his sons, he was letting his sons do anything. So if you let your children do anything and you're in a spiritual position representing God, you are corrupted, because your children, as the priests, represent God. So then Hannah bypassed all of those men and went to God and made a covenant with God. Say, if you give me a son, I'll give him back to you. God blessed her. Her son was the greatest prophet, priest Israel had ever seen. And then he created a school of the prophets so that when the high priest and their children wouldn't do right, Israel will always have prophets under the line of Cush that were anointed. And so Hannah bypassed the wickedness of the Levite priesthood and created the line of prophets that gave you the word of God, that God worked with all throughout the word. So all of the prophets are these Cushite, Nubian, from these queens. And if you find yourself in poverty, if you find yourself in the country with the most wealth in the world, but you can't seem to get your way up, listen, wife, daughter, I can't implement the Hannah vow. I cannot. She had to go to God and be put her family back in the same position that Zipporah was when Zipporah helped Moses lead the children of Israel into the promised land. And Moses didn't even go into the promised land, but Zipporah and her children did. I'm trying to tell you, we are the only nation on earth, in Egypt, in Cush, that has ruled and always allowed the queens, and God has always blessed our Nubian queens. And whenever it's inverted, it's out of order. Y'all want to see prosperity? I challenge y'all, as I lift my wife up in a proper place and I show her how to claim hers. We're going to show whoever wants to join this group and do it publicly across the country and recruit others, just to prove to our daughters and our daughters' daughters, and then the end will come. So first, David built his wife a palace. That's number one. Second, he prepared a place for the ark of God. So he renewed his covenant with God. After crowning his wife, he consecrated his marriage to God. And then he pitched a tent, meaning he created a place to worship. So after you do the covenant, you gotta do daily maintenance, worship maintenance in the covenant. And then he reestablished the school of the prophets. Nobody may carry the ark but the prophets. not the priests, not Aaron's sons, the prophets. That's the four components. That's the four components, y'all. Crown your wife. Make a covenant with God. Establish the worship, because he said the first fruits are mine. That's what worship is. Worship is where you come and you're grateful and you dedicate your children, you dedicate the works in your hand, you do the work that God has commanded us to do with the least of these our brothers around us, so that they can get back on their feet. And then your wealth flows from all of the people that you restore. It has a value with God. It's called obedience. When he checks your tab, that's where wealth comes from. Wealth comes from those four components. If you seek wealth any other way, at some point it's going to be a day of reckoning, and then because you haven't done the work that God wants, you may get what you think is earthly wealth. But God said you robbing him, and it's a judgment day attached to that type of wealth. I'm not even entertaining going down that way. If my people want to get wealth, we can get all the wealth we want to. It's 1,600 lives a piece that got to be restored. 1,600 lives a piece. That's the number. 4 times more than them. They made a movie called The 300. He said, I will open up the windows of heaven, pour you out a blessing. So they going to do 300. We're going to round it up to 4. We're going to do 1,600. 1,600 individuals, each one of us. If you love me, feed my sheep. 1,600. That's the challenge. All right? It's called the Hannah Vow, y'all. We looking for some husbands. I'm taking the lead. I'm speaking by example. Over the next three, so 2022, I'm gonna show to y'all the same calendar that he did. Same exact calendar. He got 4 major events, right? It's really 12 major events. It's 12 months and it's 12 major events. So you got 4 for just the husband and wife alone. You got 4 for the husband, wife, and kids. And then you got 4 for the whole family. 4, 4, 4, all 3. Husband and wife, for the husband, wife, and kids, for the whole union of everybody. It's that simple. It's that basic. Everything is in 4s. We break the cycle of poverty and of broken homes and terrible rate. You break that cycle. Then when he established the covenant, he made a new cycle. Then you take the lead. Meaning you leave Saul in the dust. You leave the old so far. You take the lead. That's the 3rd base. We call it the layish cycle. And then 4th, you recycle the cycle. You lay up cycle the cycle. Meaning you go right back, and then your children now is in the cycle. And then when you come back again, your grandchildren is in the cycle. Now it's generational. Anybody signing up? The wealth is in our families. The wealth is in our marriage. The wealth is in our kids. The wealth is in giving God back. Consecrated individuals who gonna go to war. This is a warrior nation. These are warrior queens. These are warrior queens. So from Bathsheba came a queen named Amamanarenas. That is Grandma Webb. And then on the West Coast, there's a queen. I'm going to get into her later. That's Grandma Leggett. And you could trace both of these lines. And you can trace them both back into the Bible, back into Europe, back up into the United States of America, up to present day, and back all the way. We could go backwards and forth. And February, I'm going to do this every day. I'm going to show y'all the blueprint. And then February 22nd through 28th, everybody who is in the group for 2022, we're going to publicly, just like David did publicly, we're going to go through this consecration for a whole week. Every couple, every child, every family member, boom, boom, boom. We're going to put it in place. And next time I come back here, I'm going to show you what David's son did. So what Xavier should be doing, Hezekiah did the same thing. David died. Another one of their relatives in between David and Hezekiah came and followed Saul's blueprint, and the same poverty, the same drought, the same famine, the same death and destruction, identical. Listen, this is as clear as when the coach give you a playbook and then he give you the plays and you getting in the huddle and you changing the plays and then you losing. It's identical. The Most High is the coach, the owner. You came in the training camp, boom, boom, boom. He gave you the plays, boom, boom, boom. You got the headset on. He calling the plays. But every time you get up the line, you see something, you change and you do something different, and y'all losing. Then you wondering why you losing. Stick to the script. And you got to stop trying to go to individuals who do not share your philosophy, who do not share your mindset, who don't have your best interest at. Stop letting them sell you a history and a legacy of individuals who have killed you. Yo, if you do not know them, if you do not know the people who write in the books that they're telling you to read, if you don't know them, listen, if I don't know them personally, I'm not reading nothing. You can't tell me nothing. Not a European can tell me nothing. Too much blood. Too much blood. If I don't know your daddy and your granddaddy, you can't tell me nothing. Too many liars, too many perverts, too many. Listen, yo, that's how you gotta be, yo. That's how the Son of God was. I don't know where y'all get this from, yo. So I challenge y'all. Stop wasting your covenant. Saul banished the covenant. That's a waste. So this is a hate, waste, fast challenge. And this is what makes us sick. Disease and pestilence comes when, listen, so we under attack right now. It is because we got people faking like they in leadership. And I'm telling y'all, everybody who takes back leadership and ownership of you, listen, you do not have to follow none of the stuff that they talk about. None of it. David ain't follow Saul's route into death and destruction. Why would you follow anybody? Because they say they in a place of authority. We all know that God anointed Saul, but when Saul didn't do right, God did not hold David accountable to follow somebody that was. And so I don't understand why y'all can't like the Constitution is God. No, God is God. If the Constitution is against God, we're against the Constitution. We're against anything that's against God. That's the principle that David put in place. If Goliath was against God, I'm going to kill Goliath. If Saul is against God, yo, I ain't having nothing to do with Saul. If my children are against God, David Army had to go kill his son, yo. What are we talking about? Constitution, United States of US, let that don't mean nothing, yo. That's why the Europeans is still around, because y'all having this cake and eat it, these philosophies. If they are not in line, if they are not sticking to the script, they are dead to us. Period. If you want to be successful, if you just want to be liked, if you want to be on the broad way that leads to destruction, sure. Fit in. I'ma lead the way. And based off of what I'm seeing, listen, I've been having a front row seat in a man that's been doing counseling. And based off of what I've been seeing at his marriage counsel, listen, women, you are not getting nowhere near what the example all throughout history, what you've been getting. So I'm a lead by example. And anybody who want to join us, y'all welcome to join this wedding party. The Slumdog Havillionaire Matchmakers.